Emily Jones was murdered tragically on Mother's Day. And you would think, wouldn't you, that this would have been a story that would have been plastered everywhere, all over the media. I would have thought it would have had news value. And people questioned why. And some of the far right have alleged that because she was a white girl that was murdered, the whole thing has been hushed up. But wasn't Madeleine McCann a white girl? We don't know if she's been murdered yet, but the police investigating this matter have concluded that it's very likely. And somehow it's the German police that are investigating a crime that happened in Portugal, but we'll come back to that. So it can't be a race thing. Is it a class thing? Is it because Madeleine McCann was from a lovely, well-off, middle-class family? Was it her look? Was it the blonde hair? Was it that iconic picture now of her wearing an Everton shirt? So kind of that one is kind of personal to me. And Brian Cannot Tell is saying blessings everyone. Thank you, Brian Cannot Tell. In the chat, Triple T is saying rich lives matter. Is it as simple as if you're well off, your life gets remembered, and if you're poor, doesn't matter. So what? You don't mean anything. If you want to answer any of these questions or give me your take on it, the number to call is 07491751203, and that should be on the screen. And I'd love to hear one day from Brian Cannot Tell. I know he's in America. That would be an international call, but he's always got such a positive vibe about him, and he's the kind of voice we need to hear in these what feel like very tragic times. And America is the center of attention yet again. I wonder, is it a case of American lives matter? The American media has become so global, so dominant. Not only is there white privilege and white supremacy in America, there is American privilege and American supremacy everywhere else. So much so that you might think that America was the main country in the world, or Americans are the majority of the world's population. And we can be guilty of looking at the world through through a Western lens. And some of the anti-racist campaigning and the point's been made that it's not good enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. But sometimes I find the anti-racism campaign elsewhere takes a very Americanized format. Maybe it's not fair to draw parallels between what happens in America and what happens in other countries. There are probably lessons we can all learn from what's happened in America, but maybe every oppressed group of people has to fight their own battle in their own way. Brian Cannot Tell saying, "Your gracious thanks. I think their words say one thing, but their actions say no lives matter but my own." Interesting. Well, I am going to play the clip breaking the news that there's been a murderer suspect found. There's PK in the chat. Hello, PK. I received your message and thank you, but that phone has no credit. It's only contactable via WhatsApp. So thank you for your message, and you're always welcome here. Let's find out what exactly has unfolded in the latest with the Madeleine McCann case. Here we go.
Anne would have turned 17 last month. Instead, her family have spent the last 13 years not knowing what happened to their missing 3-year-old. But now, in what the McCanns are calling the most significant breakthrough in the case, German police say they have a prime suspect and are treating Madeleine's disappearance as a murder investigation. While detectives aren't naming the man in question, they are investigating a 43-year-old convicted paedophile who's already in prison.
Bei den Beschuldigten handelt es sich einen mehrfach vorbestraften.
The accused is a sex offender with several previous convictions, who was also convicted of sexually abusing children. He's currently serving a longer prison sentence for another crime.
Madeleine was nearly 4 when she went missing during a family holiday in Praia de Luz in Portugal in 2007. The suspect, named by a German newspaper as Christian B, is believed to have lived at this house in the area. Police say as well as working as a caterer and doing odd jobs, he made money from drug dealing and breaking into and stealing from hotels and holiday apartments. It's thought the man also spent time in this camper van and was driving in the Praia de Luz area in the days before Madeleine's disappearance, while telephone records suggest he was there in the hours before she went missing. The man's also been linked to this Jaguar. The day after Madeleine disappeared, the suspect had the car re-registered in Germany under someone else's name. From the moment their daughter went missing, the McCanns have been at the centre of relentless scrutiny, even becoming suspects themselves. There was the botched Portuguese police investigation. A number of suspects. E-fits were issued and searches carried out.
Okay, so that's the latest from the German police who are investigating Madeleine McCann, and that story's been in the news off and on for 13 years. First call of the night, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, who's this? I hope you can hear
This
me
is
clearly.
PK.
Hello, PK.
First call of the night.
Welcome. Thank you for your message, and I couldn't get back to you because it's WhatsApp only on here, but thanks for getting through to me. What do you think gives a story news value? So, Madeleine McCann certainly seems to have it.
Wow, I mean, isn't that just amazing? If that is true, if they have found the perpetrator of that heinous act, it's bloody amazing. Two, it's fantastic for you know, the McCann, the parents of Madeleine, because they've been abused and all sorts, haven't they?
They have. They've been in the media for 13 years, and the media, whoever the media are, I hate using that term because we can be our own media. I'm trying it myself, but to be cliche, the media can be very cruel. They've been cruel to the McCanns. Also, people had their doubts about the McCanns, and I've got to be honest, I don't know what happened that day, and they were suspects at one point. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, innocent until proven guilty, but it's a very strange case.
You on that, because I've seen documentaries from so-called experts on forensic statements, you know, and things like this, and you know, from what those so-called experts say, you would assume, rightly or wrongly, you would assume that the McCanns were guilty of a crime. And I must admit, I've been have I been persuaded by these so-called experts as others? It's like that. I've always been, it's 50-50.
They had sniffer dogs that can detect the scent of death, and they detected it in their vehicle. Is that right? If I remember.
It's apparently correct, because we all know that dogs have an amazing sense of smell. I mean, I don't know if you know this. I know it's slightly off tangent, but they're now training police dogs to detect SIM cards.
Really?
And I know this for a fact because I know a guy that actually he's got police dogs, he's a policeman, and he trains his dogs to sniff out SIM cards. Why might they do that, you ask? The reason they're training them for SIM cards is because paedophiles and people like that have kiddie porn and stuff, and they hide it on SIM cards, which is why they're now training them to find the scent of SIM cards in homes and vehicles and things.
Yeah, and that's sadly necessary.
Very necessary, and it's very sad these things happen. But moving back to the to the Madeleine thing, I really do hope they do come to a conclusion, let's say, because one, it would put the public's mind to rest, and also the people that have criticised the McCanns. I mean, there is a criticism. It would be that should a parent leave a child alone of a certain age or certain ages? Well, I was brought up in the 70s as a small child. I was born in the 60s. And I can tell you in the 70s, my parents did the same thing. Different times, of course.
Was it different times, or are we just more paranoid now? Do we just suspect each other?
But I think the paranoia. I think if you go and Google it yourself, is it Julian?
Yeah, that's right, Julian, PK, right?
Yeah, that's correct. If you Google it, I think you'll find statistically that no person is more likely to be abducted as a small child now than they ever were.
Interesting.
Don't quote me on that. If there will obviously be a small shift in a percentage, but it's not like, in the 60s it was 10% chance, and today it's 90% chance. It's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. The media likes to play the fear card.
Yeah.
Because it sells bums on seats.
That's right. It does sell.
That old saying, bums on seats. So if you have a headline on your paper, which is going to be, let's say, more capture people's imagination or get their attention, you're more likely to spend your few shillings upon that rag.
And you made me think of something as well. It's maybe the lack of conclusion. The story's never gone away because we never found the end of the story. Other horrific crimes might be... We don't know what happened to Madeleine McCann. It could have been an accident. But horrific crimes have a solution.
Yeah, totally. Okay. It's open. Yeah. It's ongoing. Yeah. With the Moors murderers, which you could argue is probably the most heinous thing that's ever happened to children ever, that we know of to this day, because it wasn't just one individual by one person. It was groups, multiple. But any child lost to a perverted, psychopathic murderer, pervert, is, without doubt, a horrible thing for society and the family especially. We know that. It goes without saying, but I've said it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the innocence of a child that makes us so horrified when we hear about these awful crimes. But there is a fine line between sort of a strange term like fear porn and almost fetishizing these horrific crimes because it sells and it's sensationalism, and then I doubt that perpetuates it, but it does perpetuate the fear and the paranoia.
Yeah, I don't think it actually makes people into.
No, I didn't know, and I do. Yeah, you're right. I don't want to suggest.
No, that is something I think is wrong with the wiring of the brain.
Okay.
And there may be many factors. I mean, if anyone's listening, or any of your listeners later on listen back to this, I would definitely suggest that they go onto YouTube, because obviously YouTube is pretty much, you can get anything on there, and type in serial killers, and you'll find some really good series on serial killers, hour-long episodes of various killers from the past, and it's amazingly it's wonderful to watch because it opens you up to how the thought process is going on in the minds of these people, because these people that were caught then were in prison and then had to, underwent psychiatric, I don't know what the word would be, psychiatric
testing, analysis,
questioning, yeah. So, and then all the reports are now open in the public, because a lot of these things are quite old, but you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed at the similarity between a lot of these people, and generally, I say generally, it really does depend. But one of the similarities, especially where the perpetrators are against women, is there's a definite problem with the son-mother relationship, and quite often because the father is errant.
Okay, so it's not just. That's interesting.
From watching those.
Because at first you were sort of suggesting it was maybe physiological, and maybe if it's something in their brain and the way they're wired, there's maybe nothing we can do about that. But maybe it's because of something happened in their childhood and now they're wired like that.
I think you can't separate the both. There is definite link between nurture and nature.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you were, how would I word this? Right. Okay. I like violence in the context. I like fighting in a controlled environment, like boxing, or judo, or something like that. But I would not enforce that like upon someone on the street who wasn't. Well, I wouldn't enforce that at all. I would not impose it. I'm not a bully. However, I'm quite prepared to stand in front of someone who can sense in a controlled way and go for it.
Yeah. When you both agree to it, right? Or in the squared circle or whatever.
I tell you that one I like violence, and two, I don't like violence because I don't want someone to jump on me on the street or do it to me, and I don't want to do it to someone else. But the way I look at violence in the context of a sporting situation, such as boxing, it's like a game of chess.
Yeah.
So there's a yin and a yang there, isn't there?
Yeah. And this is another thing that we've got in common, and I think violence, as you call it, I mean, it sounds even strange to the ear, violence, but call it combat sport, call it whatever you like. It's probably in our DNA from when we had to protect our tribe, our family, or whatever it is, or when we competed for certain things, and we need it in our life. We need that yin and yang, and for most people, we're so far removed from that. The worst thing that can happen to them in any given day would be, I might get attacked. But when you put yourself in that position voluntarily, twice a week or however many times it is you train, and you take the emotion out of it and the anger, and you're practicing it, you become much less worried about it if it is going to happen. You understand it. You don't resort to it out of a reaction or out of anger. I remember working in security. You get a lot of angry, aggressive, drunk men, and they would square up to me. Oh, you have? Okay, well, you're very familiar with it. And they would square up to me, and I say, "Look, sir, or whoever, you want to fight because you are angry and you're having a reaction. I came here to work tonight knowing that there might be a fight and that I'm ready to fight if need be, but not because I want to, not out of this emotional reaction. Ego.
Bravado.
Yeah, that's right.
And a couple of beers.
That into the mix. So yin and yang. And if you study the traditional martial arts, they factor that in as well. And everyone wears a uniform and they line up. And there's so much discipline. It's so much more than just mindless violence, which again, people that don't understand might portray it as.
And also, I know we've moved away from the.
That's right. Any direction you want it after midnight.
But with the violence, there's you could argue that people that drink too much beer on a Thursday night on a paycheck, and they're in the town or city centres, and they're getting violent after they've had a few too many shandies, as I like to say. Yeah. That is almost instinctual, because there's an old saying, isn't there, that a drunk man's words are a sober man's thoughts. Drunk man's words are a sober man's thought. Yeah, the truth comes out. It comes out when you're drunk, because there's no barrier to social conditions.
Do you think that's fair? Is it not a defence when people make a remark and then say, "Oh, sorry, I was drunk," because that's just the truth coming out.
Yeah. Sometimes it is. Also, you know, also you could also look at it like primevally we have these things in us, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, and the positive way to let the dark out is through competition and sport, and through mutual and respectful battle, let's say, with rules in a ring or an octagon or whatever you want to call it. But on the street on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, when you've had too many beers, and I would say this is more prevalent if you're younger. I think if you're older and have done the training that I've done, and sounds like you've done, Julian, then we have more control over these primeval instincts, even if we are slightly tipsy. No. And when you're younger, you haven't got that life experience or the experience in the ring to have the control. So your ego and your bravado takes over more.
Well, here's a question, PK.
Somebody you shouldn't, and then they batter the fuck out. Pardon my French. They batter you up on the street, and you learn a valuable lesson.
Hopefully you do. Here's a good question that I've been pondering recently. Typically, we think of the black belt in whichever martial art or the accomplished boxer as being someone with great discipline. Now, I would say that's generally true. But is it that the sport or the martial art has taught them the discipline? Or is it that only people who naturally have great discipline anyway carry on with the sport? How many people have pitched up to the boxing club, done 2 weeks, had a spar and thought, got punched on the nose, I didn't like that much, I'll go back to drinking and having a scrap with people that don't know how to punch? Is it, which is it?
Question, and that is a very good question. And I got, the first time I got punched on the nose, and I've got my nose is a bit wonky because it's, too much fighting, but, I'm
just looking at mine, getting a bit conscious.
I'm not worried about my looks anymore. But the point you raise is very interesting. But even if somebody only does it for a couple of weeks and realises that actually there are consequences to violence, and you will get hurt, so maybe they modify their behaviour in the real world because they realise actually it's not for me. I don't know if that's true, but leading on from what you said, and we go to the George Floyd now with the police. Aren't police officers supposed to be highly trained and in charge of their emotions? And aren't they supposed to practice self-defence and martial arts or some form of it? So what I find intriguing is why they would react in such... If I was a police officer and someone was aggressive to me, because of my training in physical sports, I wouldn't react the way I see the New York policemen react. What do you think?
That's a very interesting point. And I've spoken to police. A lot of guys that work in security have also worked for the police, or you touch base sometimes. And I remember a chap telling me that they'd had instruction in some martial arts techniques. But I wonder, are they only learning the holds, the submissions and the restraints rather than the escapes, or what it feels like, as you said, when you get punched on the nose? Maybe they don't have the humility that comes from, well, you're going to... I don't know, because I haven't done the police training. I know the military do what they call milling, when they just sort of go at it.
Milling, I love that. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah?
Not that I'm military, but I'm all for that, because it shows you... Milling is basically like a pub brawl, isn't it? That's the way
apparently you just go at it, and there's at close quarters. Yeah, you see, I think the reactionary police must come from a fear of losing control. And having been and live streamed from a couple of the protests at Hyde Park recently, where Piers Corbyn was there. I noticed that the fewer people there were protesting, the more arrests there were. And I think the police felt more confident.
Sorry to interject.
Anytime.
Were the police more aggressive because there was fewer people there? Is that what you...
That's what I sensed. A smaller group that they felt they could control and dominate and make a few examples of, they laid the law down. If there's a big group that might turn on them, I think or maybe they call in more enforcements, or they get, but they seemed more likely to arrest when there was a smaller group. Now, maybe when the bigger and this is fear, playing off fear, and the fear of losing control. I mean, it reminds me of working in different security, different venues, working security. There's nothing worse than a manager who is paranoid about losing control, and then he becomes very heavy-handed. I'm going to fire you, and I'm going to fire you, and they've got a lack of confidence is very dangerous.
Yeah, and do you know what that is? It's called micromanagement.
Okay, yeah, that's the term. Yeah, I'm micromanaging you.
Do you know what micromanagement is?
I can kind of have a guess, but you go on. Give me the proper definition.
Well, micromanagement is when you have a manager. It doesn't matter what field it's in. I've had micromanagers in the past, and basically, a micromanager, what they want to do is control every aspect of the business that they are in. Mm-hmm. So if I was to explain it a little bit better than that, say I have a job and I've got a particular role in the job, which is to source products, okay? And a micromanager would say, why are you buying it from them? I need to know who you're buying it from. Or you mustn't be, if you do something and you do it, say, for example, the route of A, they'll come along and say, I wanted you to do it the route of B.
Yeah, it's a control freak, it sounds like.
So they need total control over every aspect. And what happens with a micromanager, when they try to micromanage you, and not only you, everybody else in the team underneath them, what happens is they've now got 20 or 30 different people they're trying to manage, micromanage every decision of each individual, and it overwhelms them. And then they become very draconian, very aggressive in their mannerisms towards everyone else. Because what happens is, and I'll give you the analogy, Julian, what happens if you pick up a load of sand in your hands and squeeze your fingers together?
It's gonna slip through.
Yeah, and this is exactly what happens in micromanagement, because what it does, it stops the individual from actually getting on with their job and thinking for themselves.
Wow.
Because if you have competent people that can think and make decisions for themselves, you don't need to tell them what to do, especially when they've been doing a job for fucking, pardon my French, when they have been doing a job for a long time.
Wow. Do you know what this reminds me of? Yet again, but we're having a security chat tonight. I'm sure you won't mind. Another colleague of mine had served in the Marines. I think I hope I'm the correct regiment or whatever it is. And he said the difference between us and the common soldier is the common soldier is following orders and is part of the platoon or whatever it is. But a Marine can actually go out on his own and do certain missions on his own. And they've obviously they're higher trained, and they'll be generally they're more intelligent, to put it crudely.
You've just said something, strangely enough, because I'm of a certain age where I know people that went to the Falklands. I know someone that was in Goose Green.
Oh wow!
And I could tell you a story about him, but this is not the place. But when you talk about the following orders and those being able to think for themselves, the British soldier is very much trained to, and I know this from also, I got mates that served in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, the Irish Troubles, and they're actually, the British soldier is taught to think more as an individual for himself, whereas the American soldier isn't. Now, did you know there is a games that's held every year between the British and the American military?
It happened in Wuhan, didn't it?
Yes, that's correct. There was some exercises going on, wasn't there?
Funnily enough, yeah.
Yeah.
So who comes out on top when the Brits play the Americans in the military games usually?
Yeah, and they do all sorts of different types of games. They do like massive yomps across mountains or deserts or whatever it is, and all sorts of things. But you know, the Brits generally beat them.
Wow. And is that because of teamwork or independent thinking or what?
Well, from what I know, and I'm only talking about from the guys that I know personally that did this in the 80s when they were training, and in the 90s.
Yeah.
That the guys I know went to America and beat them in war games. And
the Yanks must hate that.
The reason is, and this is what my friend said to me. He said the American soldier is part of the machine. He mans the machine, whereas the British soldier is independent from the machine. He
Interesting.
thinks for himself. Okay. So, for example, if you get an American soldier that mans a gun, like an artillery gun, you take him away from that, he can't do anything else. Whereas the British artilleryman can do other things.
Wow. Do you think we're making a bit of a jump here, but with the police? Well, I'm going to link it back to the riots. Do you think the American police are then presumably trained in a similar fashion to the military?
Well, I've been watching that. I've been watching the riot thing, and I think there's more than one thing going on. I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, go on.
If that's okay.
For sure.
The states where there's a lot more rioting seems to be Democrat states. Democrat states seem to be a lot more left-leaning.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I've also seen some videos on YouTube of Republican towns in Texas and other parts of America that are on the streets with the sheriffs and the police officers, and these members of the public are obviously ex-servicemen in uniform, because the Americans can keep their uniform, and they're wearing them, and they've got their AR-15s or whatever the weapon of choice they have is, and they're on the streets, and the bars are open, the restaurants are open, Antifa are not there, or the left is not there smashing it up. So the question I'm going to ask you, Julian, is do you think there's a correlation between the armed civilian, on the street, and the lack of an armed civilian on the street in New York and other big cities, and therefore the riots seem to be in places where there is a lack of an armed civilian on the street?
Wow. Well, there's certainly a correlation. You've highlighted it. A correlation doesn't mean a cause and effect, but it does mean there's a link there somewhere. And the right to bear arms is enshrined in the Constitution so that you can defend yourself from the state, right? Should a tyrannical regime come up.
Have you heard about that sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
go on.
Please forgive me.
Not at all.
Have you heard about that black retired police officer?
I have, and forgive me, I've forgotten his name. I think it was David, his first name. 77 years old.
Something Dawn?
I think it might be David Dawn.
Yeah. Well, what I find odd, I don't know if you find this odd, but I'm going to ask you the question. Do you find it odd that a black man, a man of colour, was killed by protesting and rioting even? Let's say rioting, not protesting. Rioting, and rioting is not legal. Rioting is... protesting is legal. Rioting is something else, I think. And yet, where is the media in this country, in Europe, in America, the mainstream media, where are they in saying, hang on a minute, this is also wrong?
Well,
why do you think that is not as predominant as Mr. Floyd?
Okay, I've punched it in, and his name was David Dawn, 77, killed while responding to an alarm at a pawn shop overnight on Monday. This is from CNN, and absolutely tragic story, and it hits me in the heart as hard as it hits me when I look at Floyd George being murdered on a personal level. But because I'm guessing the state is deemed to be culpable in some senses, or a state institution is culpable for George Floyd's death, and a lack of law and order is responsible for this one. That's why it has news value. On a personal level and on a family level, of course, your heart goes out to everyone there, and that's horrific. The guy's 77 and he served, and he didn't have to come out to help, and God rest him.
I mean, Mr. Floyd, God rest his soul. What I hope happens now is I hope that there is now the start, the potential. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. The potential for real change. And what I mean by change is, for example, in America, where you have the right to bear arms, if you see a man in uniform or a man not in uniform, i.e. a man of the state, employed by the state to do a job, or a man who is not employed by the state, but they are doing the same thing, which would be stopping someone from breathing, or inflicting pain, or possibly going to kill them. As a citizen who has the right to bear arms, question for you, Julian, do you think, regardless of whether that person perpetrating the perceived crime is employed by the state, would you think that a citizen should be able to kill that person with the gun that they are entitled to own through the Constitution?
That is a hard question. I think historically, more people have probably been murdered in the name of the law than in the name of breaking the law or resisting the law. People following rules, it was the rules to send people to the gas chamber, and it was the people breaking the rules that prevented it.
Really right. I think we'll both agree with that. Laws don't make things morally right.
That's right. Slavery was legal, and we know it was wrong. But as you're pointing out, there is a constitutional right to bear arms. Would someone, if it turns out that George Floyd was murdered, would someone have been within their right to shoot dead the cops that murdered him? You've got to ask that question, because that would be the defence of self-property or others, and that is the law when it comes to self-defence, I think.
In the Constitution, you have the right to, believe it or not, obviously I'm not bloody American, but isn't it the right to be safe in your own personal effects and property? Or...
Yeah, and they mention stand your ground, the right to stand your ground, that comes up. I don't know. I think, going back to what you said about the way the American soldier thinks, and I wonder if diffusion of responsibility is a factor, because though there was 4 of them on George, they've all been arrested now, and I think the fact there was 4 of them, they all think, well, I'm not killing him, it's the other 3. Diffusion of responsibility.
But what I find really odd, after we all know about the Nuremberg trials, don't we? And just following orders is no defence when you commit an act of atrocity against a human being.
That's right, and nor is I was just rioting. But this is the behaviour of crowds and of people following orders.
Yeah. So from the Nuremberg, we can say that just because you follow orders, and this is what I find very odd, even to this day with the British police and stuff. I'm just told to do it by my boss. I don't think for myself. You get this so often when you watch videos on YouTube, and you think, well, hang on, you're a police officer, and you're not thinking for yourself. Perhaps you're not the right person to be in the job.
Very true. But you must have heard of the Milgram experiment, where they've got someone in a white coat with a clipboard telling the participant to electrocute someone behind a wall, and they just do it because they're following orders.
Yeah.
And
What's the prison guard experiment called?
Was that the Stanford prison guard? There's the prison guard experiment, but the Milgram experiment was about administering an electric shock to a participant answering a question whom you can't see, and people were willing to give a lethal dose, a lethal shock.
There was a party involved. So the person with the white coat and the clipboard told the person.
That's right.
With their finger on the dial.
Yeah. You have to. Yeah.
To administer it to the person on the other side of the room that they couldn't see. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. And I think it's something in the human nature, as you said. If you're just the sort of person that will choke someone because it's an order or because other people are doing it, you're probably not the person for the job. And this experiment was initially.
What if this, Julian? What if this?
Go on.
What if you enjoy the sort of violence or get off on the sort of violence and you use the word choke someone? What if you are say, for example, you really are a sociopath or psychopath that gets off on that sort of stuff, that is now employed by the state, that gives you the carte blanche because you follow an order to do the very thing you like to do.
Well, then you've got a recipe for disaster, I guess.
So do you think then perhaps some of the policemen in this country and America and the Nazi SS in the past are all of the same ilk and all of that mindset that does exactly that?
And that might well be a very
scary, isn't it?
It is. Look, PK, I'm going to read some of the messages that have come in.
I'd love to hear
Here we go. Let's get your view on this.
I haven't got my telly on because I'm on my phone and my internet is my phone. So please read them out, Julian. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. We got if it's a prison or street fight, I'm grappling and using whatever I can find. MAGA style, not a coincidence. Donald Trump and show that it is good. He's also martial arts. Okay, that's a bit vague. Another one is saying, I was drunk last month. I told everyone I could fly. Okay, some of these are a bit crazy. Here's a good one. This is from Tristan. Is it me, or does the caller sound a lot like Tony Robinson? Is that the history guy?
Okay, first thing, can I just interject there?
Yeah. Sorry though, I thought we might have some really great point that I'd missed out on, but they were a bit vague.
The Tony Robinson thing. I do CrossFit every week, every day. Well, I did, right, until the COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So I love sport and boxing and keep fit and all that, right?
Yeah.
So I did that, and my coach said to me, "You sound like Tony bloody Robinson." so I'm going to have to take that on the chin and say, yes, I do. Yeah. Yes.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I've just double checked that I'm reading it correctly. He does say Tony Robinson, and not the fella from Luton, which is fine as well.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Tommy.
Yeah, Stephen.
What I find odd, now we're going to take. Now you've mentioned his name. What I find odd with Mr. Robinson is how he's been vilified in the press. And now I didn't know about Mr. Robinson until I heard about him in the press. So I decided to look up loads of stuff about him and watch all the videos I could see on YouTube. And I don't recall him ever calling black people or things like that very derogatory. I think his main beef, I know we're going off topic, but I think his main beef is about an ideology and the practicing of an ideology, if you read between the lines of it all. And, that's what I think. But we'll leave that one.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate that, PK, and it's a good debate. We'll have another night. But look, this has been your show. I'm going to rename this the PK show. I've really enjoyed it.
Julian, if I might be allowed to say,
yeah,
the questions you pose and the guests you had. Oh, was that guy you had last night?
I'm trying to remember. Last night I had Saj, and then Hannibal phoned up at the end.
Yeah, oh mate, that was brilliant.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. I'm really glad you think so.
He's the Welsh guy. Who's the Welsh guy? Was that Saj?
Oh no, there's Callum. Callum is the Welsh guy who was talking about the spiritual approach to everything. Yeah, he's a beatboxer.
Is he? Now, yeah. I'll have to check that out, because what he was saying, some of what he was saying resonated with me. Another thing, as you could see in my comments, I was okay. What about paganism? Because, that again, it's another subject. I probably shouldn't go off.
Don't worry. All right, we're going to give it 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes on paganism. I don't mind.
We should stay on the tangent we're on.
No, that's all right. Give me 5 minutes on paganism, and then we'll wrap it up before I play my Tyson Fury outro. I always play that at the end.
You mentioned Tyson Fury.
Yeah, go on.
That's 5 minutes boxing.
Yes, brilliant.
How do you rate Mr. Fury as a boxer?
Oh, I love him. So I'm going to be so biased. And I love him as a character and a boxer, and what he did last time was just his whole story, the rags to riches and losing it and then coming back is just amazing. And I love the way he moves. You probably, if you've been around boxing, you've been around the travelling community, you can recognise his moves as the classic boxing that we're used to seeing from the likes of Billy Joe Saunders down in middleweight, and he's doing it at heavyweight. I think he's amazing.
Okay, rapid fire questions for you, Jim.
There we go.
I'm going to switch it round for you.
Brilliant.
Okay, Alan Minter. What do you think of Alan Minter?
Oh, do you know what? But I know. Did he lose to Hagler?
He did.
He lost the middleweight title to Hagler.
Oh, wow,
yeah. Yeah, it's not an era. I'm clued up enough about it. I know that he lost to Marvin Hagler, so he was middleweight champion. And was he? Where was he from? Was he Welsh?
He was bloody brilliant.
Was he English or Welsh?
I remember watching his fights as a boy. You know what I mean? But
was he English or where was he from, Alan Minter? Was he Englishman?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
right, I'm getting him confused with. Do you remember Nicky Piper? He was another middleweight, Welsh, I think.
Yeah, there was also Kalsagi.
Yeah.
Welsh guy. He was. Do you know Kalsagi? He was like champion. I think some of your audience, Julian, would correct me, but he was champion for about 5, 6, 7, maybe more years in his division.
You know what? I am and was a Joe Calzaghe fan, and he won the WBO title from Chris Eubank. Quitters never win and winners never quit. At the end of his era, and in fact, I think it was a vacant title when he won it. I believe so, because Eubank was at the end of his career. Calzaghe came up. Now, the WBO, I hate slagging off fighters, because anyone that gets in the ring deserves my utmost respect. And if I saw Calzaghe, I would shut my mouth. I would shut my mouth straight away. But I just think it's a shame that he waited until about 2006 or 7 when he fought Mikhail Kessler to unify, to get a second belt. And he didn't cross the pond until Jeff Lacey came along. But who was Jeff Lacey? I think he fought Hopkins and Roy Jones too late. They were, and this is a problem with having too many divisions in boxing. You've got a great middleweight in Hopkins, a great light heavy in Roy Jones, who was floating around before that, and Calzaghe dominated at super middleweight for a very long time. Hats off to him. What an amazing record. He's undefeated. I just wish he'd done more earlier and maybe moved up and down the weights and unified and gone to America. But that's what my dad used to say. Oh, I won't pray. No, it doesn't mean anything until they do it in America. You can have any belt you want, but you need to test it across the pond.
I don't know. I mean, look,
That's a bit cruel, and that's changed now. To be honest now, boxing in Germany is bigger than America. America's finished. If you want to... Boxing was bigger in Germany. We had Klitschko's boxing out of America for 10 years. So it does change.
If you're a world champion, and you're German, you're Italian, you're bloody Japanese, if someone wants to take the title off you, they got to come to your backyard, my old son.
Fair play. Fair play. I'll take that. I'll take that one on the chin.
You can't knock a man for wanting to fight in his own backyard. You know how biased the bloody American judges have been in the
Very true. Very, very true. I did say, because we had such a long gap without think about it. Who was before Wilder? Who was the last American heavyweight champion of the world? There's a question for you, PK.
Oh, hang on a minute. Hang on, who was the guy before Lennox Lewis?
Well, overlapping in the Lennox Lewis era, there was Holyfield, who I think had the WBA championship and then lost it to Lewis, who's of course British and Canadian and Jamaican. But I think that's the last American heavyweight champion between Wilder and Holyfield. I can't think of an American heavyweight champion.
He's had it for after Lennox, didn't he?
Yeah, David Haye won the WBA off Nikolai Valuev, the giant Russian, 7'1".
Oh yeah, God, that Russian was around for ages, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was like 47, 48 undefeated or something.
And it was the bloody pikey. What's his name? We've just talked about him. He beat him, didn't he? What's his name?
Who beat Valuev? David Haye beat Valuev, and then Klitschko beat Haye when he hurt his toe.
Yeah, but what's the Irishman's name? We just spoke about him.
Middleweight? Which way? Oh,
Oh, sorry. Heavyweight.
Irish heavyweight.
Yeah, he's world champion.
Tyson Fury.
Right now.
Tyson Fury's the only Irish heavyweight champion I know.
Fury beat that Russian. Fury beat that Russian as well, didn't he?
No. Fury beat Klitschko. He beat Vitaly Klitschko, who's a Ukrainian.
Oh,
Similar.
Ukrainian.
Yeah. You had Vladimir Klitschko. You had the Klitschko brothers. As soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a lot of Ukrainian and Russian and all the Soviet bloc that weren't allowed to compete professionally, took up professional boxing and started beating everyone up. And not a steroid in sight, apparently. Lovely.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it?
Superb.
It's a lovely sport. It's what I like about boxing, from my own experiences, I've had the shit knocked out of me, if I'm allowed to say that word.
No problem.
But what I find is that when I stand in a ring with someone, I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I find if I am beating someone too easily, I will say to them, get your guard up, put your left, do you know what I mean? I won't actually end up hitting them and beating them up. I'll end up coaching them.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't want to just fucking, pardon my French, sorry, I don't want to get in there and just smash the crap out of them.
For sure.
Because I'm not the sort of person that gets off on that. I want someone to give me a good challenge.
And even you reminded me of holding the pads. I'll tell someone, keep your hands up twice, maybe 3 times. The 4th time, I'll slap them with the pad, and then they definitely hold their hands up.
Yeah, I mean, I when I go CrossFit, I go half an hour early because they got all the boxing
brilliant.
stuff on. And there's a young lad that turned up, and I trained him. And I did exactly that. When he dropped his guard, I went slap round his face and said, get your guard up.
Well, look, careful, PK. I don't know how old you are, but you remember the 70s, so just make sure you don't get in the ring with Mike Tyson when he goes at it. Or maybe you will. Maybe you'll be his comeback fight.
Do you think all time, do you reckon... I know we haven't got long left,
That's all right.
Julian. the question I'm going to ask you is now: would Mike Tyson in his prime have beaten George Foreman or Muhammad Ali or both?
And are they all in their prime?
Yeah.
Ah, man, I'm so biased, and I think Tyson. Because we love Tyson and we empathise with his pain. He had such a painful life. We want him to be invincible, and at the time, it seemed that he was. But anyone can win on their day, and I think Tyson is maybe comparable to George Foreman. Joe Fraser. And in those three, you had Fraser beat Ali, Ali beat Foreman, and Foreman beat Fraser very easily. I know Ali had rematches with Fraser, and he got the better of him eventually, but after a close, long, drawn-out fight. But in that first fight, the fight of the century, Fraser had Ali's number, and I think the way to beat the come forward fight. So Fraser is a come forward fighter, and that can sometimes pressure a boxer and beat him. But the way to beat a come forward fighter might be to brawl him. And Foreman was a brawler with a swinging punch. So they're a bit like rock paper scissors. Just because one beats the other one doesn't mean the other one beats them.
Who are you, Julian?
What's that? What type am I?
Yeah.
I can't tell you. Okay. You know what? You know what? I was very much a. Go on.
Oh, it's not allowed.
No, I'm joking. You know what?
No animosity. I'd love to have a spar with you.
No, me too. I would love it. I would. Yeah.
And here's what people don't get: you can have a heavy spar, and you can have a light spar, and you can do multiple rounds. You can go heavy for a minute, and you can go light for 2, and you can vary it up. Yeah. And if you've got a referee and someone that knows boxing to guide you, you can learn a lot from each of those.
Yes, you can.
Those different types of workout, those different types of working.
Yeah.
And I always say this: I actually always learn more when I come out with fucking, pardon my French, a bloody nose and a black eye than I did when I didn't.
That's exactly right, because that is how you learn. That's how your brain learns. Oh, I bet you can. As someone told me, what telling isn't teaching. You can't tell someone be better, but we discover things out in the world. That's why we have pain. It's there to protect us and help us learn. But to answer your question, I was like quite a tall and very tall for a welterweight, and still tall for a middle and light middle.
Well, I'm a light welter.
Oh, okay. Well, I boxed at 69 kilos when I was boxing, which was welter, and then
30 stone, Julian.
So that was about 11. That was 11 stone, and then
I'm about 10, 8 stone.
All right, we can have a catch weight competition.
Yeah. I'm just under your weight.
But that's the thing. Now, sparring with guys that are lighter than you. I mean, we're about the same weight. It'd be similar weights, really. But the heavyweight who spars the middleweight has a hard time, because the middleweight can use his speed and no one will criticise him, but the heavyweight has to hold back his power. So sometimes you learn more from sparring the lighter guy and learning to cope with his speed. And then when you get someone your own size, you're like, "Whoa, this is like playing slow motion."
Because if you're lighter, the physics says that if someone is, let's say you're giving away a stone or 2 stone. I mean, I'm going to tell you a true story now. I was sparring in the ring, and in my boxing club, we basically all gum shields, head shield, and gloves and all that. And what the coach used to do was go, "Right, John, you're in that corner, another person in that corner, another person in that corner, another 4 corners of the ring." So, and he used to have someone stand in the middle, and you used to fight each person in the 4 corners. So a 2-minute round on each. That's 8 minutes, yeah.
The shark tank, I think some people call it.
Sorry,
some people call it the shark. You're in the shark tank, right? You got to fight everybody.
Yeah. So I had this one lad. He was 15 stone. He hadn't been doing boxing as long as I had, and he looked at the coach and he said, "What, you want me to fight him?" Pointing at me.
Yeah.
I knocked him out in about 3 seconds with
wow.
a hook and an uppercut.
Oh wow,
And
superb.
afterwards, no, I'm not bullshitting. Afterwards, the lad come up to me and he said, "You've taught me a valuable lesson." Never, and it was, do you know what the lesson is? You know it. Never, don't judge a book by its cover.
That's exactly right.
And
Wow.
I said to him, "Yeah, but you've only been here for 3 or 4 weeks. I've been doing this like 2 years.
Yeah.
What do you expect?" So, you know,
Wow.
there you are.
That is a valuable lesson. Oh man, PK.
Anyone listening, if you wanna know how to defend yourself in a pub, which is most likely where you're going to get bothered, in a pub or the streets. So anybody listening, close quarters, taekwondo and all that rubbish, what you've got to kick it above the head ain't going to work. You've got to get your boxing in, mate. You've got to get in, get your quick hands and get boxing in. Once you know that, anyone gives you any grief in a pub, you'll be able to have a go if need be. Not that, if you can walk away, walk away. But if you can't, you know you've got the skills. There you go.
Another valuable lesson. PK, thank you so much, my friend. You've really you've been a star.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for allowing me to come on your show and speak my mind without you putting me down and saying that what I think is wrong.
Not at all.
And I do appreciate that, and I would love to contribute more in the future. And also, anyone listening, please, if you have viewpoints that disagree with me or anyone else that speaks in Julian's show, air them.
Exactly.
It's only through dialogue and it's only through conversation that we can realise where I'm going wrong, where you're going wrong, where all of us are going wrong, or where we're going right at the same time.
100%.
So, yeah. So, everybody, I bid you a good night. I wish you a good weekend. Julian, thank you very much.
Nice one, PK. Wonderful, mate. Thank you very much. We catch up.
Take care. And I will end the call now, Julian.
No problem,
and I'll let you do your...
We catch up.
Your monologue.
That's it. It's Tyson Fury in the background. Thank you. I'll see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
There goes PK. Yeah, speaking his mind and speaking his heart. And that, I think, is the most important bit. I really appreciate that. It's been Lessons for Life. There's nothing more to say other than we were here and we're gone. Latest.